The Children of the Red Storm, a lost story of the ancient Martian civilization, the sand of time, the memories of days long gone. They say Mars is dead, at least some claim that, but it was not always like that. In long forgotten times it was a living planet, with a living culture and peaceful beings. But now it is a cold, rocky desert sphere, whose thin atmosphere mercilessly devours and extinguishes every spark of life. Life hardly stands a chance here anymore, after everything that happened back then. Yet the elders told and still whisper the legend quietly to this day. The silence of Mars is not emptiness, it is a lesson, a warning. When one overestimates oneself, it is memory, a memorial. Underground in caves that were once temples, cities, palaces, stories lie hidden and concealed, barely findable. The last remnants of human ego, not found in books, but in the fibers of the stones, the atoms of the sand, in the layers of frozen ground. They say that whoever listens long enough into this silence hears the whisper and the warning. It is the voice of a vanished world, a world that thought too highly of itself and overestimated itself too much. A civilization that thought they could play God. This quite barely perceptible voice tells of a time when Mars was not dead, but full of radiance, full of laughter, full of anger, full of dark greatness and dark desires and cravings. And above all, full of humans. Yes, humans like you and me. Humans who wanted to surpass and access their own creation, who thought they were something better, and that was their death sentence, the thing that broke them. This is a story of the loss of woman and offspring on Mars, a story that discarded and destroyed life, and that in the name of progress, technology, and supposed perfectionism. The story of hubris, of greed, of coldness. The story of an entire planet that believed it could outsmart nature and erase itself and wiped itself from history. Chapter 1: The Golden Age. The Empire of Areshtan. Millions of years ago, so the elders and the wise say, Mars shone like a ruby in the starlight, a glorious culture and wonderful planet whose rays of beauty shone in all directions. Its greatest empire was called Areshtan, a world of red crystal towers that sparkled, glimmered, and glowed like burning amber in the sunlight. Their radiance was so beautiful that it drew one under its spell. Beneath these towers flowed channels of emerald green water, the lifelines feed from deep oceans that nourished the beings. Airships drift silently above the cities, and in the halls of the libraries, holographic writings flew through the air like glowing birds. A world that was a dream for anyone who saw it. The humans of Mars were not like today's humans, yet not entirely different either. They had many parallels and thought something in time and in beings forever repeats, until they learned from it. They were, so it's told, taller, more graceful, full, densely boned because of the stronger ancient gravity. Their eyes shimmered amber-colored, as if containing sunbeams. They called themselves Ishara, the Awakenings. Among them ruled harmony, connection, and fairness between the genders. Women were considered bearers of the Shalom, the creative life energy. Their intuition, their empathic connection to spirit fields was regarded as indissensible. Men were considered bearers of the Archon, the structuring force. Logic, architecture, and technology were their domain. Together, they created a world that thought its equal in the solar system and yet was unique. But harmony is fragile, just like peace. Greed, ego, and power are hungry beasts and act like a virus. The rise of the Sicreen. The first era was the most legendary of all, but the more time passed, the more visible and clear became the slow decay. In the late dynasties of the Crystal Age, a completely new movement emerged, the movement of the Sicreen, a technocratic brotherhood, and with them everything truly began. They believed the future did not lay in spiritual balance, harmony, justice, and goodness, but in overcoming nature through technology and ruling over others, and in a kind of ranking system in which the higher ranks were not longer accessible to everyone. The guiding principle of the Sicreen was:
creation is a mistake. Perfection lies in technology.
They built factories that produced living metal structures. They created thinking machines that could measure and read the vibrations of thoughts. And they worked on the project that was destined to change everything: the artificial womb, the birth crater, and the shattered helix, a device meant to make biological reproduction unnecessarily, so they could intervene in offspring at any time. Many women opposed them. They said,
"The Shaloon, the creative feminine essence, can't be mechanically reproduced or faked created."
But the Sicreen had power, wealth, influence, and military troops that suppressed such statements and manipulated the population into agreeing. They persuaded the rulers of the empire to listen to them. For Mars was preparing for, let's say, expansion, for spreading to other stars and planets, perhaps to neighboring Earth and other galaxies. And an army needs supply, a supply that must be constantly guaranteed. Many felt women are inefficient when one wants to produce soldiers en masse. They are useless and only good for one thing, perhaps. For amusement, for dark spirits to siphon and transform their energies for purposes that brought no harmony at all. Those began the first of many mistakes. Others will soon follow. The birth machines of the era Selmar. The birth machines, the birth forks, were enormous oval chambers of semi-organic substance bathed in golden green light. A mixture of mechanical development and organic matter which had been taken from woman in order to experiment on it and even learn to artificially produce it. They were not just technical devices but bioneuronal constructs, terrifying apparatus celebrated as achievements. The Sikrin called them Meira, the mothers of metal. But love and bonding were missing from them by nature. Machines create machines. Humans create humans. That is what they had forgotten. Without spirit and feeling, a machine remains cold and empty. At first, they truly succeeded in generating, or rather production, viable children. These were even stronger, faster, more precisely controlled and, as desired, less emotional and barely spiritual. The elites were enthusiastic and rejoiced. The Sikrin were praised and celebrated for this work. But what followed? Natural birth declined. It was considered bad to conceive children in the usual way. Later, such acts were even punished. Yet the children, as it was later said, had no dreams, no creativity, and no independent thoughts. And that was the first of many ohms, but not a good one at all. Chapter 2. The Decline. The disappearance of femininity and the feminine creative spirit. Two things happened in parallel. First, through genetic intervention, they wanted to make women more resistant to radiation, planetary storms, and other things, because they were considered too fragile, although their strange layers were. But errors in the code led to incurable degeneration of the female chromosomes, which could not be corrected no matter how hard they tried. They found no solution. Second, the male elite of the Sikrim began to push women out of important positions or have them removed if they did not leave voluntarily. They saw them as burdens of nature and inefficient tools that only stood in their way. The number of fertile women dropped dramatically. The number of natural women decreased rapidly. The population saw the danger but was powerless. They had already handed over their power to the Sikrin and forgotten who they truly were. And if small uprising did occur, the Sikrin merely said,
Do not worry. The machines replace everything. We create a better world.
And so large parts of society even sterilized themselves voluntarily, blinded by promises built on lies, believing that civilization overcomes biology. The last natural girl and woman became a sacred rarity traded at high value. Though nothing good was intended for them, quite the opposite. They were called Nayari, the last daughters of the Shaloon. And they were protected, or at least one tried as best as possible, but this would not last forever. They become coveted genetic material for various experiments. They became targets, victims, the hunted. The emotional hardening, the frozen heart, the heartless machine of logic. With the extinction of women and the rise of machine-born children, society changed profoundly. It did not happen overnight. It was a clearly woven plan that unfolded slowly so it would remain unnoticed. It creeped like frost across the planet, like a dark veil settling over the beings. The children hardly cried anymore, which was initially considered good. But human bond dissolved as well. Social competence declined, brutal competition and the ego mindset replaced cooperation and teamwork. Logic suffocated compassion, gratitude was replaced by entitlement. War became sport, the only goal. And in the streets, new sayings appeared, new guiding principles constantly repeated like a permanent mantra.
The new Martian race needs no mothers.
Emotions are errors of the bio body.
The new Martian race needs no mothers.
But the planet itself began to suffer, to grow sick and slowly die. The sea, lakes, rivers, and oceans receded. The graceland bloomed less and finally withered. Storms raged for hundreds of years. Darkness lasted longer and longer. Many murmured and whispered in secret.
Mars hungers for the Shaloon, for the feminine, and without it, it is dying.
But the sea crane did not listen, and if they noticed such talk, it was crushed in the bud. Opinions and speech, even thoughts were dictated. One could hardly speak freely, and if one did, harsh punishment followed. The screen allowed neither contraction nor revolt. Chapter 3: The Lie of Perfection. The collapse of the birth machine. But the birth machine required something long overlooked or underestimated. Something considered unimportant, but far from it. The intuitive, emotional, non-linear energy field that only woman could produce, not consciously or forcefully, but naturally, because it lay in the feminine nature. This field was called in ancient times Genshal, the soft wave. So it is still written in the forgotten sand of time. It stabilized the neuronal base structures of the artificially bred fetus. But without it, fat tissues collapse, nerve network dissolve. The children develop severe cognitive disorder. Many died before or shortly after birth, and diseases spread. Diseases and illnesses the people had never known and seen. The Sicrane tried to reproduce the field artificially. They truly believed they could simply create it. Thus, they built various devices, crystal resonators, energy chambers, AAG-based empathy generators, and more. But nothing helped. None of the ideas bore fruit. Everything they created failed. The artificial offspring grew weaker and sicker, Their lifespan dropped rapidly and did their intelligence. But their aggression and impulse grew immeasurably. One counselor said at that time,
We have created generations without hearts, and now we are alone with beings whose mind knows only storm and hatred.
but by then it was already too late. Turning back was impossible. The last woman. The day inevitably came when the degeneration of the machines threatened the survival of the civilization, and at this time only one natural woman remained alive. There truly existed only one woman. Her name was Talineira. She was 21 years old, had silver white hair and deep violet eyes, a mutation that made her unique. The Secrane sought her. They wanted to capture her, imprison her, experiment on her. They planned to clone her, genetically scan her, and use her Shaloon energy as a battery. But a rebel group called the Guardians of the Flame hired Talineira. They were men of the old spiritual teaching, still remaining and understanding that the natural cycle was dying. They protected her like their mother, like a diamond. They brought her to the temples of Talamir, far beneath the planet's surface, far from everything, into deep caves protected from war. Or so they believed and thought. But they underestimated the Secrane, and eventually the Secrane found Talineira. It is said that one of the last nights before she was captured, Talineira whispered into the womb of a rock.
If I die, may my essence go to the stars. May it one day ignite new life.
Then she was taken and connected to the machines, but the machines broke, for Shaloon cannot be forced or artificially produced. It did not take long, about a star cycle, before Talineira finally died. With her died the last natural woman of the planet, and thus the species was completely doomed. On that day, time began to run out, the time that announced the end. Chapter 4. The era of willless warriors and obedient soldiers. The world of man without mothers. The world now consists solely of a male population, and one that was largely artificially produced, psychologically unstable and emotionally impoverished. Woman existed only as legend, as myth, or as robotic imitations, which did not replace a natural woman in the slightest. Life became harder, more difficult, and ungovernable, for the most important link was missing. There were no families, no upbringing, no bonding, no empathy, no ability to plan long-term or live in harmony and peace. Everything was a struggle, a fight, a great war. Those the cities burned for the sake of ego mind, for everyone only wanted to be stronger and more powerful than the other. The libraries were plundered, destroyed, and burned. The machine soldiers ran amok because their neural network collapsed. They were literally out of control, and nature had long ceased to cooperate. The storms devoured the landscape. One of the last chroniclers cried into the sand of time.
We thought we were gods, but we forgot that even gods need a mother.
The last war was the Brother War. The planet Mars was divided into castes. The technocrats, the soldiers, the fallen, which were genetically unstable birth, the nomads of the desert and sand, the crystal priests, or the old spiritual orders. When resources dried up, they all fought each other, merciless and brutally. They were two factions claiming power. On one side stood the harsh clan, a military brood, large, brutal, without mercy, empathy, or heart. On the other stood the Secrane remnants, cold, logical, emotionless, obsessed with technology and artificial advancement. The war lasted 1,300 years and cost countless lives. It is said that it burned itself into the rocks of the canyons and the sand of time. But no one won in the end. There were no victors and only losers. For as they fought without mercy and with extreme brutality, the entire planet died, and those their home. Chapter 5. The Bitter End. The death of the seas. The seas and oceans evaporated and vanished. The water sank through cracks into the underground. It seeped away. The sun faded and the sky turned dark gray-black. Temperature fell rapidly, and with them the last remnants of nature died. No being survived. Storms and thunder rained from then on. There was no ecosystem left to stabilize, for they had destroyed everything. Without Shaloon, without the feminine, the planet, so it said, lost its inner balance. Man believed the planet Mars had a soul, and that this soul left at that time. The last king, Solanamar. Solana was the last legitimate ruler and king of the planet, a king without subjects, without people. He came from an artificial birth, but with an unusual stability, a seeming miracle. He even possessed a certain degree of empathy which frightened his contemporaries. When the Secrane tried to turn him into a controllable puppet, he rebelled. Solana tried to unite the remnants of civilization. He searched for ancient records of Shaloon, had genetic archives excavated and studied. He tried everything within his power to save his planet, his people, Mars. But he had to realize the planet was already beyond salvation. It was too late. So he chose something else. He wanted at least a spark of the Martian civilization to survive, or at least have the possibility to survive. And his gaze wandered. He searched the universe. His search led far, and he turned his attention to Earth. Chapter 6. The Exodus. The flight to the blue planet, a new hope and chance. Earth at that time was still very young, wild, full of volcanoes, but also full of life and possibilities. Possibilities denied to Mars. Many Martians believe
there what we have now lost forever could be reborn.
They built giant ships, the Arar spheres. They were half organic, half technological, shining like silver moons. Only a few thousand could flee with them. The others fought, died, or froze in the coming centuries. When the first ship set out for Earth, Solana watched from the highest tower of the fortress of Marantesh as the lights rose into the sky. He is said to have spoken.
Perhaps the shadow of our mistakes will teach another people not to become as we did.
Then the tower collapsed under a storm of icy wind and buried him. Sulana's body was never found, but hope dies last, does it not? Perhaps his hope lived on. The last day of the planet Mars. It colded, the temperature fell rapidly, even the machines came to a halt. All cities, large or small, were swallowed by the sand of transcendence. The entire atmosphere dissipated into space and time, leaving only shadowy memories written into the ether. The planet Mars became what we know today, ice-cold silence, frozen in the depth of space, lifeless and blood-red like the suffering shed there. A tomb of ancient dissolving memories in the deepest hidden caves. So the elders, the wise, speak across time. The last crystal of the Shaloon still glimmer, crystal shining like the tears of a dead goddess. A glorious culture, a wonderful planet that fell victim to machination, ego, greed, and evil. To this day, the souls mourn their home, whether the refugees survived or died on the way to their new home. Who knows? Who knows? Time will tell whether they learned from their mistakes and whether they did things different that time. The flame and the blood of Earth. Those who flew to Earth became sound and smoke, became legends, tales, and myth. Who were they? We cannot say with certainty, but some speculate. Were they the Anunnaki, nameless others, fabled strangers, or perhaps the Nephilim, the mistress of the dawn? Were they the luminous, the red wanderers? Many names drift through space. Some say one thing, others another, but only in the sand of time lies the truth. It is said they mingled with early humans. Legends speak that they brought knowledge to humankind, but also warnings to do things differently than they once had. Their greatest legacy is clear. It is a teaching handed down in many old cultures and still told across the earth.
Never destroy the balance between masculine and feminine, for a world that loses one loses itself in the end.
Those ended the civilization of the planet Mars, not through meteors or natural disasters, not through volcanoes, floods, or storms, not through strangers, but through the hand of its own inhabitation. Through forgetting balance, through neglecting creation, and through the arrogance that everything must be manipulated and controlled. Through abandoning Shaloon, free expression, creativity, and femininity. And perhaps, so some say, a spark of this lost Shaloon still lives within us today, in every single soul, in every intuition, every dream.